Hi, this is Alan Train with CodeArt. We're a small company helping clients around the world succeed with their Episerver implementations. Today I'm going to show you a cool example of how you can use Episerver CMS and Episerver Forms together with Microsoft Power Automate tool to build a custom meeting request form on your website that will automatically interact with your Office Online Outlook calendar. So in this case, let's just try it out. I'm going to try filling out a meeting request form on my website here, John Doe. Enter an email address and say I want to talk about a business idea, and then we pick a time for the meeting. It could be next week maybe, and we ask to request a meeting. And what happens is within a few moments we actually get it popping up as an event in our calendar here, and we can even look at that event, and we see that it's John that invited it and when it was requested. So that's pretty cool, but how did it all come about? Well, if we take a look at our Episerver setup here, we can see that basically I have a form here, request an online meeting form, that I put on my front page. The form is pretty basic. I added some form elements. There's the name, the email field, the topic field, and a meeting date field, which isn't one of the standard form fields, but it is one in the added samples pack for forms, so it's easy and free to install. In this case, I decided I wanted a date picker, so people will just pick the date that they are interested in the meeting, and then we will find the best time during that date. Of course, there's a submit button. What happens is that we have the settings page here, and on the settings page, Episerver has this feature called webhooks. Basically, that means that if you provide a URL here, it will send all the data that was submitted in the form to this URL, and in this case, it will even post it in JSON format. So this looks like a really complicated long URL, and thanks God I didn't have to think of it myself. This is a URL coming straight out of Microsoft Power Automate. Microsoft Power Automate used to be called Microsoft Flow, and this is my access to it. It's part of the Office brand package, but to use some of this functionality, you do need a premium account for this, which has a certain per user count per month, but it's not a lot. Here you can define a number of business flows where you set up different interactions between other software systems. In this case, I just defined my own flow. So basically, I set up a flow that starts whenever it receives an HTTP request. Now, what's really cool here is that HTTP request can actually map up to the one coming straight from my Episerver forms. So I just take the URL that it's given me in here, and I basically just inserted that as a webhook URL right there. Now that's done, you need to specify the schema for the data coming in. And if you don't know how to specify JSON schemas, don't worry, because you can use sample payload data to generate the schema. So you just have to see what kind of data is sent out from Episerver, and then you can use that to generate the schema. Now, once that's generated in the trigger here, that means every time this happens, this flow will start launching, and there's a bunch of actions that will then happen in sequence. Now, we could have changed the flow here. We could have made multiple parallel steps. We could have if statements or control statements just by adding an action here to check if something is the case, or if not, then we want to act in different ways. But in this case, it's a fairly straightforward one. We get a request for a meeting. We then use the integration to Outlook from Power Automate to find a meeting time for this specific attendee. And once that is done, we check out the meeting time. It should be between 9 o'clock and 5 o'clock. And this will then in turn return a bunch of options, which we get down here, of my possible time slots that day. This is just a little bit of logic that will use a built-in method to pick the first of the possible time slots. And then after that's done, we get data sets with the time slot, and we will use that data to pass it into JSON, which just means that we can access it in an even nicer way when we get to this point here where we create the event. So in this case, we basically can use values, like in this case, the subject. We can use this data coming straight from all the different steps before this, like for instance, the data from the trigger, or the data from find meeting times, or from the outputs of the steps we had before. And we use this to get the topic and to set up start time, end time, and so on. And we can, of course, add different attendees that we need for this down here, and decide what text should be in the body of the document. It's all pretty straightforward and fairly easy to use. It takes a little bit of fumbling around to get it to work, and then you can go ahead and you can test it, and you can run it with different data sets, and you can see what actually comes out of it. But the end result means that we get data straight into our Outlook calendar. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this quick show. See you again soon in another video.